my pixelated adventurers. Today we're diving into the legendary world where crystals hold the power and your fate is determined by a job class system. No, it's not your last career fair, it's the iconic realm of Final Fantasy. Imagine a world where your survival depends not on your LinkedIn profile, but on whether you can wield a bigger sword than your ego. Now, before we embark on this quest filled with danger, drama, and more plot twists than a daytime soap opera, let me tease you with a little gem. We'll uncover how a single spell in the game became a meme-worthy sensation, transcending the boundaries of the gaming universe. So sharpen your swords and let's decode the magic formula that turned a desperate last stand into a franchise that outlived its own name in expectation. Way back in the mid-1980s, a small Japanese company named Square was on the brink of financial ruin. Their games weren't just hitting the mark, and it seemed like the end was nigh. Enter Hironobu Sakaguchi, a name that would soon become synonymous with RPG greatness. He proposed an ambitious project, a role-playing game inspired by Western hits like Ultima and Wizardry. But this wasn't just any game. It was possibly the last game Square could afford to produce. It was, quite literally, their Final Fantasy. Sakaguchi, along with a small but talented team, including character designer Yoshitaka Amano and composer Nobu Uematsu, set out to create something extraordinary. Contrary to popular belief, the name Final Fantasy wasn't chosen because it was Square's last shot at success, though that's a neat piece of gaming apocryphy. The truth is, Sakaguchi wanted a title with the initials FF because it sounded good in Japanese, and Final Fantasy fit the bill. It was a fantasy that, if unsuccessful, could have been their final one, but not intentionally so. Despite the skepticism surrounding its release, Final Fantasy became a monumental success, not just saving Square from bankruptcy, but also setting the stage for one of the most beloved and enduring franchises in gaming history. It's a testament to the creativity and perseverance of its developers, who, against all odds, created a masterpiece that has left an indelible mark on the gaming landscape. But at the heart of Final Fantasy lies a narrative that feels as grand as an epic saga and as personal as a hero's inner journey. Players step into the boots of the Warriors of Light, 4 young heroes chosen by the crystals, each a beacon of the world's elements, to embark on a quest to defeat dark forces, restore balance, and save the world from impending doom. It's a tale as old as time, or at least as old as the medium of storytelling itself, but with a twist that captivated audiences worldwide. The beauty of Final Fantasy wasn't just in the story it told, but in how it told it. Unlike many games of its era, which relied heavily on gameplay with minimal narrative, Final Fantasy wove its gameplay and story together in a seamless tapestry. Each character, though initially a blank slate, became a vessel for the player's imagination, growing in depth and complexity as the game progressed. This approach allowed players to project their personalities and choices onto their characters, making the journey feel incredibly personal. The narrative complexity was further enriched by the game's world building. The universe of Final Fantasy was a melting pot of fantasy tropes, mythological references, and original creations. This eclectic mix created a world that felt familiar yet wholly new, inviting players to explore its depths. From the mythical city of Cornelia to the fiend-infested Marsh Cave, each location had its own backstory, culture, and challenges, making the world feel alive and dynamic. A pivotal aspect of the game's story was its use of crystals as central plot devices. These weren't just shiny MacGuffins, they were deeply integrated into the lore and mechanics of the game. Each crystal tied back to the classical elements: earth, fire, water, and air, serving as a symbol of the world's health and balance. This thematic use of elements would become a reoccurring motif in the series, echoing the game's message about harmony and interconnectedness of all things. What set Final Fantasy apart from other RPGs of its time was not just its expansive story or immersive world. It was the way it challenged players to think about heroism, sacrifice, and the nature of evil. The antagonists weren't just obstacles to be overcome, they were characters with motivations and backstories, often tragic ones. This nuanced approach to storytelling, where lines between good and evil were blurred, made the game's narrative resonate with players on a deeper level. Now diving into the gameplay mechanics of Final Fantasy, we're not just talking about pressing buttons and watching numbers go up, though, let's be honest, there was plenty of that. We're talking about pioneering game design that set the gold standard for RPGs to follow. At its core, Final Fantasy introduced a turn-based combat system that was like chess, if chess pieces could cast fire and summon mythical creatures. This strategic gameplay required players to think several moves ahead, balancing attack, defense, and magic to overcome foes. The game's world was a sprawling, pixelated wonderland filled with towns, dungeons, and an overworld that players navigated with an increasing array of vehicles. Each location wasn't just a backdrop, but a puzzle piece in the grand adventure, with secrets hidden in every nook and cranny. Exploration was rewarded, not just with loot, but with lore, making every step off the beaten path a leap towards understanding the game's rich world. But let's get to the heart of the innovation, the job system. Players started with a choice of character classes. From the brawny warrior to the spell-slinging black mage, this choice wasn't just cosmetic, it shaped the entire gameplay experience. The system allowed for a dynamic team composition, making each playthrough potentially unique. Want to steamroll enemies with brute force? Go all warriors. Fancy a magical ballet of destruction? A party of mages is your ticket. This flexibility added layers of strategy and replayability that were unheard of at the time. Now, if you think choosing a job class in Final Fantasy is as hard as choosing a major in college, you might be onto something. Except, in Final Fantasy, you can't switch your major to undeclared halfway through. So choose wisely. And while you're pondering that life-threatening decision, why not hit the like button and subscribe? It's the only choice I can assure you you won't regret, unlike my brief stint as a mime in Final Fantasy Tactics. But that's a story for another video. The launch of Final Fantasy onto the gaming scene wasn't just a success story. It was akin to the phoenix rising from the ashes of Square's near bankruptcy, soaring high into the annals of video game legend. This wasn't merely a game that did well, it was a lifesaver, pulling Square back from the financial brink with the grace of a well-cast cure spell. Released in Japan in 1987, it initially sold over 400,000 copies, numbers that would make even today's indie developers blush with envy. But it didn't stop there. When Final Fantasy made its pilgrimage to North America in 1990, it brought with it a surge of interest in JRPGs, a genre that had struggled to gain a foothold in the Western market. This wasn't just about numbers on a balancing sheet or cartridges in homes. Final Fantasy's success story marked a pivotal moment in gaming history. It demonstrated the global appetite for rich, story-driven RPGs and paved the way for the series to become a household name. Each subsequent release was met with anticipation and excitement, establishing a legacy that would extend far beyond the original game. Final Fantasy became more than a franchise. It was a cultural phenomenon, inspiring an array of merchandise, movies, and even theme park rides. It was the start of a fantasy that, decades later, shows no sign of concluding. The game also played a crucial role in the evolution of video game music. Nobuo Uematsu's iconic composition for Final Fantasy showcased the emotional and narrative potential of music in games, elevating the role of soundtracks in creating immersive and compelling gaming experiences. Tracks like the prelude and the main theme have become synonymous with the series, celebrated for the musical complexity and emotional depth. And speaking of depth, let's crack open the treasure chest of Final Fantasy to unveil some gems that even the most seasoned adventurers might have missed. Now, I promised you a spell that became a meme-worthy sensation, didn't I? Well, strap in because we're talking about none other than the infamous ineffective results when casting certain spells on bosses. This little quirk became a source of amusement and frustration, embodying the game's challenge and its cheeky charm. Imagine gearing up for a colossal battle, chanting your most potent spell, only to be met with the RPG equivalent of better luck next time, bud. It's like bringing a rubber sword to a dungeon fight. Hilarious in hindsight, but oh so galling at the moment. But the surprises don't stop there. Did you know Final Fantasy contains a reference to one of its developers hidden within its pixelated depths? Kazuko Shibunuwa, one of the unsung heroes behind the game's art, left her mark quite literally. Players who venture into a certain town might stumble upon a gravestone inscribed with, "Here lies Link." Yes, that's a nod to the protagonist of the Legend of Zelda series, but it's also a cleverly disguised homage to Shibuya, whose work helped define the visual style of Final Fantasy and many games that followed. Speaking of hidden gems, Final Fantasy is a masterclass in mythological Easter eggs. The game's bestiary reads like a who's who's of mythological monsters. From the Medusa-like cockatrice to the Tiamat, a nod to the Babylonian mythology. This fusion of folklore and fantasy wasn't just about creating challenging foes, it was a way to immerse players in a world where myths walked the earth, or the pixelated screen as it were, lending a sense of depth and wonder to the adventure. And for the trivia aficionados out there, did you ever wonder about the origins of some of the game's iconic spells? Final Fantasy's magic system introduced gamers to spells like Fire-Aga, Blizzaga, and Thundaga. These names, while catchy, are actually derived from the simplification of the Japanese naming convention, where the suffix ga denotes the spell's power level. It's a small detail, but one that illustrates the meticulous thought put into even the most mundane aspects of the game's design. Finally, let's talk numbers. In Final Fantasy VII, players can accumulate gil, the game's currency, through battles and quests. However, eagle-eyed players might have noticed that the maximum amount of gil you can carry is 9,999,000. Why such an oddly specific number? It's due to the limitations of the game's programming, which only allowed for a 7-digit figure. This cap became a subtle challenge to completionists, a reminder of the game's technical boundaries and a badge of honor to those who reached it. And there you have it, fellow adventurers, a dive into the pixelated depths of Final Fantasy that's more rewarding than finding a hidden room full of treasure chests in a dungeon. Either way, remember to save your game, keep your HP high, and for the love of crystals, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into the annals of gaming history. Because in the world of video games, the end is never truly the end. It's just the start of a new plus game. If you enjoyed this walk back through the history of Final Fantasy, click this video here to see more from the Retro Reload. And as always, thank you for watching.